In the midst of a pandemic, CONCACAF put out a new qualifying system for the World Cup. It was very different. We didn't know what it was all about. It seemed so far away. Well, second round of qualifying is now concluded in our region, and we can see the finish line in the distance. The light at the end of the tunnel. We are down to 8 teams. 8 teams inside the Octagon, essentially, as the 5 teams that were given the double bye, the United States, Mexico, Costa Rica, Honduras, Jamaica, will be joined by El Salvador, Canada, and Panama. Panama! I can't sing. I'd love to sing that song, but I better not. So now we know the 8 teams that remain that will be fighting inside the Octagon. It's the last time I'll do that. And while we can preview it a little bit further ahead, and we will look at what the United States needs to do based on this schedule to make sure they don't repeat what happened back in 2017. This is still going to be very challenging. I'm going to worry U.S. men's national team fans because the teams that are there are going to be all difficult in their own way. And it all begins September the 2nd. So let's show you the schedule. But before I show you the schedule, this is the Soccer OG. A reminder to hit that subscribe button because things are getting really good. Subscribe. Did you do it? Good. And also check out the Soccer OG podcast, new one coming out on Wednesday, where I will be joined by the Cooligans. We'll talk about the Euros. We'll talk about what I'm about to talk about. We'll talk about just covering this sport in the United States and Canada and everywhere. So we'll give a little breakdown of the teams that are in there. 8 teams remain. All the teams, it was disappointing for the Caribbean. The only team remains now is Jamaica, Haiti, Trinidad and Tobago, all getting knocked out. Good run for Canada got in there, and then El Salvador and Panama, as we touched on. So I'm going to read the schedule. And again, we're going to need to know a lot more, and we'll preview this a little bit later, but I'm getting a jump start because that's what the Soccer OG does. We'll know the venues of these games, and that's an important detail because where does the United States play Mexico? You don't play them in Texas. You don't play them in LA. Where does the United States play Costa Rica, El Salvador, Canada? Where do you play in the winter months? When do you play in March of 2022? This is all important. We'll get to that later. But here we go. This is the schedule. We'll go through the 2021 schedule because we don't want to get too far ahead. It all begins September the 2nd in San Salvador, as the United States will have to travel there to El Salvador. September the 5th at home against Canada. September the 8th, they will travel to San Pedro Sula, one of the hostile areas where it's very difficult to get points. That's September the 8th. And what you will see, 3 games in September, 3 games in October, then 2 in November, and then there will be 6 more games in January, February, March. March 24th at Mexico. Keep that in mind. March 30th at Costa Rica. So the United States wrap things up in a very challenging fashion. You hope they get things done before that. So we went through the September games. October the 7th, Jamaica at home. Where do you play them? Do you play them in Texas? Do you play them in Colorado? October the 10th, down to Panama City to take on Panama. October the 13th, at home against Costa Rica, a team that the United States lost to at home in 2017, bring up a lot of criticism to U.S. men's soccer about where do you schedule these games. They did it in New Jersey. November the 12th, Mexico. November the 16th at Jamaica. And then there will be 6 more games in 2022. So let's go through the teams that are in there in somewhat chronological order. Starting with El Salvador. This is a team that has made the World Cup on a couple occasions, but it hasn't done it since 1982. They've bolstered their defense with the introduction of Eric Zavaleta. Very tidy in qualifying for them, led by Hugo Perez. They made those 2 World Cups, most recently in 1982, where they lost to Hungary by 10-1. Next up, Canada, the first home game. And the Canadians, much improved. We know about Dave and Dave, Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David. They got by Haiti, and they haven't made the World Cup since 1986. That was in Mexico. They gave France a good run before losing to the USSR and Hungary. Kyle Larin scoring a goal in qualifying. This is a team that's going to be a very difficult out. They all are, to be perfectly honest. At Honduras, The United States played Honduras in the Nations League, and we remember what a challenge that was. They have arguably the best striker in CONCACAF with Albert Ellis. Really, the top two strikers are Albert Ellis and Jonathan David. It's one of those two. It's not a Mexican, it's not an American. They've made the World Cup in 1982, 2010, 2014. They did try the Swiss in one game in that World Cup, the last one. They did win the Gold Cup in 1981, but Honduras is going to be a handful as well. Next up, and again, we're going in the right order, Jamaica. Jamaica, the Reggae Boys. They didn't have to go through the two stages of qualifying. They were already in. They've got a lot of English-born players they're trying to bring in to join Leon Bailey, who hasn't played with them recently, but he will be there. You have the guys like Andre Blake, Adrian Mariappa in defense. Mikel Antonio, we thought he would be there. He didn't get called up into the last group of friendlies. I think it still happens. We hear he's working out a passport, but there's also talk that England may want to bring him in. And I think what happens in the Euros may determine that, because Antonio's really good, and they see him maybe as a backup to Harry Kane. So the Reggae Boys, they made one World Cup in 1998, beat Japan, but then got throttled by Argentina and Croatia. Next up is Panama, who made the last World Cup in 2018 at the expense of the United States. They have a very stingy defense. I think they allowed 2 goals in their 6 games. I like how they've moved from the old guard, which was Blas Perez and Roman Torres, and some of the new guys have stepped in. Very athletic team. That's going to be, I think, one of the teams you hope to get points on the road, but it's still going to be really hard, and they're going to complicate things for a lot of squads, as they've done historically in World Cup qualifying. Costa Rica on the 13th. I want to say this about Costa Rica. I love you. The Ticos are fantastic. They got to change their logo, their crest, right? They got to change this thing. This thing looks like from a Michael York movie in the 70s. I don't want to offend anyone, but come on, let's update this sucker. Costa Rica, still relying somewhat on the old guard, but this is a team that just makes World Cups all the time. Keylor Navas is still going to be the goalkeeper with a new club, obviously, with what's going on at PSG. Christian Gamboa is a good defender. Got to move away from Celso Borges and Brian Ruiz. But you can't vote against the Ticos. They have made 4 of the last World Cups, and in 2014, they made the quarterfinals, and they won a group ahead of Uruguay, Italy, and England. So Costa Rica, they're going to be there in the end because of who they are, if nothing else. Who haven't I mentioned? Mexico, November the 12th. November the 12th, Mexico just had a huge matchup. The United States won. I think the U.S. have to like their chances. You can still qualify for the World Cup without getting the points against the Mexicans, but the U.S. used to do it. 2-0 was a famous scoreline. They really should do something. At the very least, get a point at home, wherever that home game is. People are saying Minnesota. I love Denver and Salt Lake as a possibility as well. Let's see if that happens. But the big game between USA and Mexico, because it's in March, will determine everyone's prospects moving forward. Final 2021 game back at Jamaica. And there we go. We'll all start it. So there you go. This is going to be very challenging. I've been watching the qualifiers. I've been impressed by all 8 teams. I was impressed by Curacao. I was impressed by Haiti. They're not perfect teams. They have difficulty scoring goals against good opposition, but they all have positives, whether it's their goalie, whether they have a good center back. Like I said, Panama's getting younger, and Honduras moved a little bit younger too, and I think they'll have a real shot. So what does the United States have to overcome? Many of these players have not experienced this. As we go back to 4 years ago, there are only 2 players in the starting 11 in the game against Trinidad and Tobago and Cuba that are still featured with this group. Christian Pulisic and DeAndre Yedlin, who started that game. Tim Ream, Kellen Acosta were on the bench. Maybe all 4 of them make it, but there's so many fresh ideas coming in for the U.S., which is good and bad, because the reality is they're used to getting first-class treatment with their club of Barcelona, Juventus. They're not going to get that in San Salvador, San Pedro Sula, Ciudad Panama. It's going to be hell-raising, certainly. But maybe these guys are ready for it. You need the toughness. That's why I really want to see Weston McKennie and Tyler Adams do well early on, because I think those are the two figures that can push forward the U.S. because of that physical nature, because of that uncompromising attitude. We need to see who else we can depend on around John Brooks, and we need to see what we do with the fullbacks. What comes with Serginho Dest? You saw my last video. Can we rely on him in that position? I think you want a lot of players in here, but you got to have that good core group. What do we do with the goalkeeper situation? I brought it up here before anyone else on the Soccer OG. People laughed at me, but now it is front and center. Is Zach Steffen the guy? He looks shaky, got an injury. Ethan Horvath. That has to be resolved, because a lot of these games, especially on the road, are going to be the 1-0 variety, where you're going to have your goalkeeper make those 2 or 3 big saves. This is all going to happen here for the U.S. They have to overcome a lot. I like their chances. I think Mexico finishes 1. USA finishes 2. Honduras finishes 3. I'm going to put Canada in 4th. And so how it works, top 3 teams qualify automatically. 4th place team goes the Intercontinental Playoffs. We don't know who plays who yet. There's going to be a draw. But it will be the team from Oceania, which last time was New Zealand, the 5th team out of Asia, which was Australia last time, knocked out Honduras, and the 5th place team in South America, which was Peru. I think you want to avoid South America because that could be Colombia or Uruguay. So you hope for Oceania, and maybe CONCACAF gets that, because you want to see 4 teams get it. You obviously can't overlook Costa Rica as well. Gold Cup starts July the 11th. That'll help build the World Cup qualifying. There's so much to talk about. It's unbelievable. That'll help the qualifying process. And then the World Cup begins November of 22, and we are off and running. Soccer OG, here to serve you. Subscribe. Check out the podcast. We'll see you here soon to talk more of the beautiful game.